In March 2026, archaeologists working at ancient sites across northern Israel made a discovery that would fundamentally change our understanding of human civilization. They were excavating Natufian settlements when they found something extraordinary in the dirt. Small clay objects, no bigger than your thumb, that had been buried for 15,000 years. But these weren't just random pieces of pottery. They were carefully crafted ornaments, beads and pendants shaped with incredible precision by human hands, and preserved on their surfaces, clearly visible after millennia, were 50 human fingerprints. The fingerprints of adults, teenagers, and children who had lived and worked together in humanity's first workshops 15,000 years ago. This was more than just an archaeological find. This was a window into the birth of human creativity itself, because these clay ornaments were created thousands of years before pottery was supposed to exist, thousands of years before agriculture developed, thousands of years before humans were supposed to have the time or inclination for artistic expression. Yet here was proof that our ancestors were already creating beautiful objects for no practical reason except to express their identity and pass on their culture to the next generation. The discovery shattered every assumption about when and why humans began creating symbolic art. It proved that creativity, identity, and cultural expression emerged much earlier than anyone thought possible, and it revealed that children played a central role in humanity's first artistic traditions, learning from their elders and contributing their own innovations to practices that would define human culture for millennia to come. Laurent Davin, the Hebrew University archaeologist who led the research team, put it simply: this discovery completely changes how we understand the relationship between clay, symbolism, and the emergence of settled life. But the implications go far beyond archaeology, because if humans were creating symbolic art 15,000 years ago, before agriculture, before cities, before everything we associate with civilization, then our entire understanding of human development is wrong. The capacity for creativity and symbolic thinking wasn't something that developed slowly over thousands of years. It was there from the very beginning, waiting to emerge whenever humans had the opportunity to settle down and work together. The workshop that time forgot. The clay ornaments were discovered at 4 Natufian sites across northern Israel: El Wad and Nahal Oren on Mount Carmel, Hayonim Cave in the Upper Galilee, and Einan Malaha in the Hula Valley. These sites represent some of the earliest permanent human settlements in history, occupied by the Natufian culture between 15,000 and 11,700 years ago. The Natufians were hunter-gatherers who lived at one of the most crucial moments in human history, the transition between nomadic hunting and gathering and settled agricultural life. They were the first people to establish permanent villages, the first to develop complex social hierarchies, and the first to create the technological and cultural innovations that would make agriculture possible. But what archaeologists found at these sites challenged everything they thought they knew about Natufian life. Instead of finding only stone tools and hunting equipment, they discovered evidence of sophisticated workshops where people gathered to create beautiful objects that served no practical purpose except to express their identity and creativity. The 142 clay ornaments discovered represent the largest collection of Paleolithic clay objects ever found. Before this discovery, only 5 clay ornaments from this time period were known to exist anywhere in the world. The sudden appearance of nearly 150 such objects proved that clayworking was not an isolated experiment, but a sustained cultural tradition that lasted for thousands of years. The objects themselves are remarkable for their sophistication and beauty. Small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, they were carefully shaped from unbaked clay into cylinders, discs, ellipses, and even complex butterfly forms. Many were coated in red ochre using a technique called engobe, where liquid clay rich in iron oxide is applied to create a smooth, colorful surface. This is the earliest known use of engobe in human history, a technique that wouldn't become common in pottery for another 4,000 years. The beads show evidence of careful planning and skilled execution. Many were shaped directly onto plant fiber threads, suggesting they were made to be worn as jewelry from the moment of creation. Others were formed around wild cereal straw cores, creating hollow centers that allowed them to be strung together. Some show evidence of being fired in open flames to harden them, while others remained unfired, probably because they were intended for short-term use or as offerings in ritual contexts. But the most extraordinary aspect of these objects is what they preserved. 50 human fingerprints, palm impressions, and fingertip marks remain clearly visible on the clay surfaces after 15,000 years. The preservation is so perfect that researchers can determine not just that children participated in making these objects, but specific details about how old they were and what role they played in the creative process. One butterfly-shaped bead still bears the fingerprints of a child approximately 10 years old who shaped it 12,000 years ago. The child's prints are clearly visible where small fingers pinched and molded the clay, leaving a permanent record of a moment of creativity that occurred before the pyramids were built, before writing was invented, before agriculture transformed human society. Other objects show the collaborative nature of Natufian workshops. Adult fingerprints overlap with those of teenagers and children on the same pieces, suggesting that bead making was a social activity where knowledge and techniques were passed down through generations. Some objects appear to have been made specifically for children, including a tiny ring only 10 millimeters wide that could only have been worn by a small child's finger. The fingerprint evidence reveals something unprecedented in archaeology: the ability to identify specific individuals who lived 15,000 years ago and to understand how they worked together to create objects of beauty and meaning. For the first time, archaeologists can move beyond studying artifacts to studying the actual people who made them, their ages, their relationships, and their roles in ancient society. The children who changed everything. Perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of the discovery is the evidence that children played a central role in humanity's earliest artistic traditions. This challenges fundamental assumptions about childhood in prehistoric societies and the development of human creativity. Traditional archaeological thinking assumed that children in prehistoric societies were essentially passive recipients of adult culture. They were fed, protected, and gradually taught adult skills, but they weren't considered to be creative contributors to cultural innovation. The Natufian clay workshop evidence proves this assumption wrong. Children weren't just learning to make clay ornaments. They were actively participating in their creation and probably contributing innovations of their own. The fingerprint evidence shows that children as young as 10 were skilled enough to create complex objects independently. Their fingerprints appear on some of the most sophisticated pieces in the collection, proving that they had mastered techniques that required considerable practice and skill. Some objects show evidence that children experimented with different approaches, trying new shapes and techniques that don't appear in adult-made pieces. This evidence suggests that childhood in Natufian society was very different from what archaeologists had assumed. Children weren't just miniature adults waiting to grow up. They were creative individuals whose contributions were valued by their communities. They had their own aesthetic preferences and were encouraged to express them through their work. The tiny ring made specifically for a child suggests that Natufian adults recognized children as individuals with their own needs and desires, rather than just future adults. The collaborative nature of the workshops also reveals something important about how knowledge was transmitted in prehistoric societies. Instead of formal instruction where adults taught passive children, the workshops appear to have been environments where people of all ages learned from each other. Children learned basic techniques from adults, but they also contributed their own innovations and perspectives that influenced how the tradition developed over time. This pattern of collaborative learning and mutual influence may have been crucial to human cultural development. It suggests that creativity and innovation emerge most effectively in environments where people of different ages and skill levels work together, each contributing their unique perspectives and abilities. The Natufian workshops may represent humanity's first educational institutions, places where knowledge was not just transmitted but actively created through collaboration across generations. The evidence also suggests that children's participation in clayworking had important social and psychological benefits. Creating beautiful objects gave children a sense of accomplishment and identity within their communities. It provided them with skills that increased their value to the group and probably enhanced their status as they grew older. It connected them to cultural traditions that linked them to their ancestors and would be passed on to their descendants. Perhaps most importantly, it gave them a way to express their creativity and individuality within the context of shared cultural practices. This balance between individual expression and cultural conformity may have been crucial to the development of complex human societies. It allowed innovation and change while maintaining social cohesion and cultural continuity. The technology that shouldn't exist. The technical sophistication of the Natufian clay ornaments challenges assumptions about technological development in prehistoric societies. According to traditional archaeological theory, complex technologies develop slowly and gradually as societies become more sedentary and specialized. Pottery, for example, was supposed to emerge only after agriculture provided the food surpluses that allowed some people to specialize in craft production. But the Natufian ornaments prove that sophisticated clayworking technology existed thousands of years before agriculture developed. The Natufians were still hunter-gatherers who lived in small communities and moved seasonally to exploit different food resources. Yet they had already mastered techniques for working clay that wouldn't appear elsewhere for millennia. The engobe technique, used to color many of the beads, represents a particularly sophisticated innovation. Creating a smooth, even coating of colored clay requires precise knowledge of clay chemistry, proper preparation of materials, and skilled application techniques. The Natufians had developed this technology 4,000 years before it became common in pottery production. The firing techniques used to harden some of the beads also demonstrate advanced understanding of thermal properties and combustion control. Creating the high temperatures needed to fire clay without destroying delicate objects requires careful management of fuel, airflow, and timing. The Natufians had solved these technical problems without the benefit of kilns or other specialized equipment. Perhaps most remarkable is the evidence that the Natufians had developed standardized production techniques that could be taught across generations. The consistency in bead shapes, sizes, and manufacturing methods across different sites and time periods suggests that knowledge was being systematically transmitted rather than rediscovered independently by each generation. This level of technological standardization is usually associated with much more complex societies that have developed specialized craft production and formal educational institutions. Yet the Natufians achieved it in small communities that lacked both permanent settlements and occupational specialization. The implications for understanding technological development are profound. If hunter-gatherers could develop and maintain sophisticated technologies without agriculture or permanent settlements, then the traditional model of technological progress needs revision. Technology doesn't require complex social organization to develop. It requires human creativity, experimentation, and the ability to transmit knowledge across generations. The Natufian workshops suggest that these capabilities have existed throughout human history and have driven innovation whenever people had the opportunity to settle down and work together for extended periods. The discovery also raises questions about what other sophisticated technologies might have existed in prehistoric societies but left no archaeological trace. Clay working survived because clay objects can be preserved for thousands of years under the right conditions. But how many other innovations in textiles, woodworking, food preparation, or other areas that use perishable materials might have existed but disappeared without a trace? The Natufian evidence suggests that prehistoric peoples may have been far more technologically sophisticated than archaeologists have realized, limited not by their cognitive abilities but by the preservation biases that favor stone and ceramic artifacts over organic materials. The birth of human identity. The Natufian clay ornaments represent more than just technological achievement. They provide evidence for the emergence of symbolic thinking and personal identity in human societies. Creating objects that serve no practical purpose except to express identity and beauty represents a fundamental shift in human consciousness. It suggests that the Natufians had developed abstract concepts of self, community, and aesthetic value that required sophisticated cognitive abilities. The diversity of ornament styles and decorative techniques suggests that individual creativity and personal expression were valued in Natufian society. People weren't just following rigid cultural templates, but were experimenting with new forms and decorations that reflected their personal aesthetic preferences. This emphasis on individual creativity within shared cultural frameworks may have been crucial to the development of complex human societies that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining cultural continuity. The evidence that ornaments were made for specific individuals, including children, suggests that personal identity was recognized and valued from an early age. The tiny ring made for a child indicates that Natufian adults saw children as individuals with their own needs and desires, rather than just future adults. This recognition of individual identity may have been essential to the development of the complex social relationships that characterize human societies. The use of red ochre to decorate many of the ornaments also suggests that symbolic thinking had become sophisticated enough to associate specific colors with particular meanings. Red ochre has been used by humans for symbolic purposes for over 100,000 years, but its use in the Natufian ornaments represents a refinement and standardization of symbolic color usage that suggests shared cultural meanings and values. The production of ornaments in workshop settings where people of different ages worked together also suggests that identity formation was understood to be a social process. Children learned not just techniques for making objects, but also the cultural values and symbolic meanings associated with different forms and decorations. They developed their personal aesthetic preferences within the context of shared cultural traditions that connected them to their ancestors and contemporaries. This balance between individual expression and cultural conformity may have been crucial to human social development. It allowed innovation and change while maintaining the social cohesion necessary for group survival. The Natufian workshops may represent humanity's first successful solution to the fundamental challenge of creating societies that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining their cultural identity. The ornaments themselves served as markers of individual and group identity that could be worn, displayed, and passed down through generations. They provided a way for people to express their membership in specific communities while also expressing their individual personalities and aesthetic preferences. This dual function of identity markers may have been essential to the development of complex societies that could integrate individuals with different backgrounds and experiences into coherent social groups. The revolution in understanding human development. The discovery of the Natufian clay workshops forces a fundamental revision of theories about human social and cognitive development. For over a century, anthropologists and archaeologists have assumed that complex behaviors like symbolic thinking, artistic expression, and technological innovation emerged gradually as societies became more sedentary and complex. The progression from hunting and gathering to agriculture to complex civilization was seen as a necessary sequence where each stage provided the foundation for the next. But the Natufian evidence proves that this linear model is wrong. Complex symbolic behaviors emerged thousands of years before agriculture, permanent settlements, or occupational specialization. Hunter-gatherer societies were capable of sophisticated artistic expression, advanced technology, and complex social organization without any of the prerequisites that were supposed to be necessary for such developments. This has profound implications for understanding human cognitive evolution. The capacity for symbolic thinking, creativity, and cultural transmission wasn't something that developed gradually over thousands of years as societies became more complex. It was present from the beginning, waiting to emerge whenever humans had the opportunity to settle down and work together for extended periods. The Natufian workshops suggest that the cognitive abilities that characterize modern humans were fully developed by at least 15,000 years ago and probably much earlier. What changed over time wasn't human cognitive capacity, but the social and environmental circumstances that allowed those capabilities to be expressed and developed. The evidence also challenges assumptions about the relationship between technology and social complexity. Advanced technologies don't require complex social organizations to develop. They require human creativity, experimentation, and the ability to transmit knowledge across generations. These capabilities appear to be fundamental characteristics of human societies, regardless of their size or organizational complexity. The discovery has important implications for understanding contemporary human societies as well. If creativity and innovation emerge naturally when people of different ages and backgrounds work together in collaborative environments, then modern educational and organizational institutions might benefit from adopting some of the principles evident in the Natufian workshops. The emphasis on collaborative learning across generations, individual expression within shared frameworks, and practical application of creative skills might be more effective than formal instruction and rigid specialization for developing human potential. The Natufian evidence also suggests that childhood creativity and participation should be valued and encouraged rather than treated as preparation for adult productivity. Children's contributions to the workshop activities weren't just practice for future adult roles, but genuine creative inputs that influenced how the traditions developed over time. This perspective on childhood might inform contemporary debates about education and child development. Perhaps most importantly, the discovery provides evidence that human creativity and innovation are not recent historical developments, but fundamental aspects of human nature that emerge whenever people have the opportunity to work together in supportive environments. The capacity for beauty, meaning, and cultural expression has been present throughout human history, waiting to flourish whenever circumstances allowed. The Natufian workshops remind us that these capabilities don't require complex technologies or institutional structures to emerge. They require only the basic human needs for creative expression, social connection, and the transmission of knowledge across generations. The legacy of the first artists. The 15,000-year-old clay workshop discovered in Israel represents more than just an archaeological site. It represents the birthplace of human artistic tradition and the proof that creativity has been a driving force in human development from the very beginning of settled life. The 50 fingerprints preserved in the clay ornaments provide a direct connection to the individuals who created humanity's first art workshop, allowing us to understand not just what they made, but how they worked together and what their creative process meant to their communities. The evidence that children played a central role in this earliest artistic tradition challenges everything we thought we knew about childhood in prehistoric societies, and suggests that creative education and intergenerational collaboration have been essential to human development throughout history. The technical sophistication of the ornaments proves that advanced technologies can emerge in any society where creativity and experimentation are valued, regardless of the level of social complexity or institutional development. But perhaps the most important legacy of the Natufian workshops is what they reveal about human nature itself. The drive to create beautiful objects that serve no practical purpose except to express identity and meaning appears to be a fundamental characteristic of human consciousness. It emerged as soon as people had the opportunity to settle down and work together, thousands of years before agriculture, writing, or any of the other innovations that we associate with civilization. The Natufian clay workshop reminds us that creativity, beauty, and cultural expression are not luxuries that emerge only after basic survival needs are met. They are basic human needs that have driven innovation and social development throughout history. The children whose fingerprints were preserved in the clay beads were not just learning practical skills for future adult roles. They were participating in the creation of human culture itself, contributing their own innovations and perspectives to traditions that would influence human development for millennia to come. The discovery changes our understanding of what it means to be human and what drives human societies to develop and change over time. It suggests that creativity and cultural expression are not secondary effects of social complexity, but primary drivers that motivate people to create the technologies, institutions, and relationships that define human civilization. The Natufian workshops represent humanity's first successful experiment in collaborative creativity and cultural transmission. They established patterns of intergenerational learning, individual expression within shared frameworks, and technological innovation that would characterize human societies throughout history. The clay ornaments they produced may have been small and simple, but they marked the beginning of humanity's journey toward the artistic and cultural achievements that define our species. 15,000 years later, we are still following the path that began in those first workshops, still creating objects of beauty and meaning, still passing on our knowledge and values to the next generation, still working together to express our individual and collective identity through the power of human creativity.